It started with hopes for democracy. Even the most prominent commentator about the Middle East of the New York Times was standing in the Tahrir Square and was overwhelmed with a stream of people who are shouting to democracy, and he was sure that democracy comes to the Middle East. We know what democracy is because we, both in the United States and in Israel, we live in a democratic society. We actually, or I think that most of us have never experienced living in another system. If I'm correct, maybe those who came from ex-Soviet Union or ran away from some dictatorship like Romania as it was under Ceausescu, or Yugoslavia under Tito, not to mention the Arab War. But most of us do not know about what it is to live under different systems. This is why when something changes, immediately they think that, oh, this is going to be democracy. What else? What else is it going to be? There is no other system but democracy. So evidently this is going to be democracy. And this is actually what is the wave of enthusiasm about what happened. I'm talking about 3 years ago in the Middle East. When you listen to commentators, especially from the Western world. However, we know about another system of countries which are not democratic. I'm talking about this ex-Soviet Union. Ex-Soviet Union was a giant country, a giant state, which fell apart in the end of the 90s to some 10 ethnic states. There is Russia today, and from the Soviet Union what we have today is Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Armenia, Ukraine, Belarus, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, okay? All these countries which are all ethnic states. Everyone, Kazakhstan is the state of the Kazakhs. And the Armenians, and the Armenians have Armenia. And Belarus is an ethnic group which defines itself of the Belarus. So, what we found out when the Soviet Union fell apart is that ethnicity, which was covered through 70 years of the Soviet Union, actually remained alive. Although one of the most important slogans of the Soviet Union was fraternity of peoples, of nations. All these under the red flag. We saw the same phenomenon in Yugoslavia, which was also a conglomerate of ethnic groups like Serbs and Croats and Bosnians, with a bloodbath during the 90s. Now, there are 7 ethnic states which today exist very peacefully, very nice, very stable states. Nobody fights with anybody else, especially these days, because every one of them reached a situation where it lives by itself, every ethnic group, and it deals with its own issues. Czechoslovakia, of course, Czechoslovakia was not a mayhem, but it divided itself with an agreement between the Czechs and the Slovaks, and now the Czechs have the Czech Republic, and the Slovaks have the Slovak Republic, and everybody is satisfied. Everybody is happy. What do I draw? What conclusion I draw from these 3 examples: ex-Soviet Union, ex-Yugoslavia, and ex-Czechoslovakia? That ethnicity, even in Europe, is alive and kicking. And when peoples are given the opportunity, they would like to live in an ethnic state. What we know is a nation state. Look at Belgium. Belgium is always on the edge of being divided between the Flames and the Wallons. The Flames who speak Dutch, and the Wallons who speak French. They don't mingle with each other. And if one day they divide Belgium, it will be a national process. Scotland already announced that they are willing to vote in a referendum about, I think it will be the end of this year, whether to remain in the United Kingdom, with the Welsh and the Irish, very united kingdom. And also in Spain, there are all kinds of cracks in the unity of Spain. So in Europe, we can very easily see that under the European Union, means the currency, standards of production, and so forth, ethnicity is still alive, and people want to live in their own nation state. The Arab world, or the modern Arab world, is a group of states. Most of them are a combination of dictatorships and conglomerates, like the ex-Soviet Union. I'm talking about, if I go from the east to the west, start with Afghanistan, continue to Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Jordan to a large extent, Yemen, Saudi Arabia in its way, Libya, Algeria, Tunisia less, but Morocco big time. All these countries are conglomerates of ethnic groups, tribes, religions, and sects. What do I mean? Ethnic groups, let's say Iraq, has Kurds in the north, Arabs and Turkmens and Persians in the south. Different languages, different mindset, different rules, different clothing, different everything. Like Japanese and Romanians. Different. Okay, so the same are Kurds and Arabs. Unfortunately, between Kurds and Arabs, they actually even hate each other because of various reasons, and we do remember the constant war between the central regime or central government in Iraq during the 60s and the 70s, between the central government and the Kurdish district of Iraq. We might remember names like Mullah Mustafa al-Barazani and Jalal Talabani, who led the rebellion against the central government, supported by Iran of those days. So within one state, we saw for decades bloodshed, tremendous bloodshed between the government and its citizens. Why? Because they are not the same ethnic group. Iraq is divided to 74 tribes. And tribalism in the Middle East is not only alive and kicking, it is alive and killing. Because every tribe, especially in places like Iraq, Libya, Algeria, Syria, of course, every tribe, first of all, it's a family of like some dozens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who live on one place for centuries. And they develop their own dialect, mindset, rules, leadership, and their rules are usually contradictory to the state rules. I'll give you two good examples. The tribe is actually based on loyalty. That everybody, because everybody is a family, so everybody is loyal to everybody in the family. Imagine that somebody, let's say, killed somebody from another tribe. So all his tribe are supposed to hide him. So the government will not come and put him in jail or kill him. Because this is what loyalty means. So according to the tribe law, if you hide a killer from your tribe, you are a hero. According to the state law, you are a partner in crime. Especially if you know that you killed somebody. How can you bridge between the tribe law and the state law? Another good example, according to the tribe law, the dignity of the tribe or the honor of the tribe is the most important asset which the tribe has. If, let's say, 25 years old lady, married or not married, allows herself to behave in a too liberal way with boys, according to the state, usually, a lady in such an age has a freedom to do whatever she likes, with whoever she likes, whenever she likes, because she's a grown-up. According to the tribe law, if she inflicts shame on the tribe, her punishment is what they call in Arabic ras mel'ar, means washing the shame with her blood. Okay? So how can you compromise between the state law, which grants the lady freedom, and the tribe law, which takes the whole freedom away from her? So you cannot find a compromise, because this is why the state always is viewed as the enemy of the tribe, of the local tribe. So Iraq is fragmented to 74 tribes. And this is the main problem in this unfortunate country. The same thing is with Afghanistan, with 11 ethnic groups divided to who knows how many tribes. So Pakistan with 4 ethnic groups, Sindhis, Punjabis, Baluchis, and Pashtunis. And so it goes all over the Middle East. Conglomerates of tribes and ethnic groups. Berbers in North Africa, Nubis in Egypt, and others. However, when we come to religion, the picture is much more complicated. In the Middle East, we have more or less 10 religions. There are 10 different religions. The most important is Islam, of course, means the most prevailing. We have Christians, Jews, not only in Israel, also in the Arab world, at least traditionally. Sabais, Mandays, Alawis, Baha'is, Zoroastrians, Yazidis, and some more religions. Most of them, of those little religions, which rarely we hear about them, if at all, are viewed by Muslims as infidels. Those who believe in these religions, especially the Alawis in Syria. They are idol worshippers. And according to Islam, at least the radical interpretation of Islam, once somebody is caught worshipping idol, his fate is to be shot by hand or convert to Islam. This is the choice, no other choice. So religions might be very problematic in the Middle East, especially when one religion sees the other religions as illegitimate to a degree that the adherents to those religions are supposed to be shortened by him. And the subdivision of religions are sects. The Islamic societies are divided between Sunnis and Shiites and Salafis and Sufis and all kinds of others. And Christians are also some denominations in the Middle East. We have Copts in Egypt. We have Assyrians, where we have Nestorians, we have Greek Orthodox, we have Roman Orthodox, all kinds of churches in the Middle East. Some of them are Catholic, some of them are Orthodox, some of them are Protestant. So also the Christendom is divided in the Middle East, and also the Yazidis are divided to 2 sects. Never mind. But this is another division. So the states in the Middle East, which we mentioned, are actually, every one of them is a conglomerate of ethnic groups, tribes, religions, and sects. The British and the French and the Italians, when they marked the borders of these countries, when they were the mandatories, hoped that one day they all will sit around one fire and sing Kumbaya together. It never happened. It doesn't happen. And according to my assessment, a very long time will pass until it starts to happen. Why? And this is what people here find it hard to understand. This country was established by individuals who came to this country as refugees or immigrants. They or their fathers, their parents or their grandparents. And they came, or everyone who came to this country came to be American. Not to remain Pashtun in America, not to remain something else, but to be an American. And to share with the other American fellows the American dream of life, of liberty, and together to pursue happiness. They live wherever they live, they send their children to the same school, and you can very easily see in the school where the parents came from. This one, his parents are Afro-Americans. This one, his parents are Chinese or Japanese or Russians or from South America. From all the world, people came here. Second generation went to school together. They had the same English almost, got married with each other. Third generation doesn't even remember where the grandfather came to this country. Means that the melting pot maybe didn't do a perfect job, but definitely did a very good job. And if not the third generation, fourth generation. And you see the outcome in this country. People think that it is very easy, if it works here, that Africans will live with Europeans, Muslims, with Christians, Jews, with everybody. So this is because it happens here in this country. What's wrong with those people in the Middle East that it doesn't happen there? Why should the Sunnis kill the Shiites? Why the Muslims persecute the Christians? What? It works here, it should work there. Why doesn't it work there? And this is a big difference between here and there. Here we are talking about a society which is built by individuals. And when you come to the individual, for individual to adopt a different culture, it's easy. His son, if he goes to public school, will be in another culture. His language will be different. Because the father still speaks English with an accent from where he came from. But the son and the daughter are speaking already English, which they learned in school. And the grandson doesn't even understand the language of the grandfather. Okay? This is what I mean being together. In the Middle East, since we talk about groups, big groups, which live on the same place for generations, no, centuries, if not millennia, why should they change? They speak the same language, they have the same mindset, the same laws. You can take a U-turn with a little car. You cannot take a U-turn with a train. No, this is the issue. You can change the culture of a person if you force him or make him send his son to the same public school with another somebody who came from another country. Together they will have another culture, the second generation. But when you have a group of people who, let's say, Los Angeles, everybody speaks a language nobody understands. Imagine, and everybody here is a cousin, second cousin, third cousin, fourth cousin of everybody else. Daughters are married off inside Los Angeles because you will not let anybody have your daughters because they are not from the same tribe. And Los Angeles has an army to deter the American government from imposing its laws on Los Angeles. Okay, and the local militia is armed to its teeth, mainly in order to defend the oil sources of Los Angeles, because Los Angeles sells the oil by itself, takes the revenues to itself, and doesn't share the revenues of the oil with the central government. Okay? By the way, this is exactly the situation in the Kurdish district today in Iraq. They take the oil from Iraq, from Mosul and Kirkuk, they sell it by themselves, and they don't show even one penny to the central government. Why? Because they can. Because they have an army, the Peshmerga, and the Peshmerga is much more powerful than the Iraqi army, and the worst is that the Kurds have no sense of humor. And the Arabs are very careful when they talk to the Kurds. You say they have derech eretz to them. I didn't say derech eretz. They respect. They respect the Kurds because the Kurds never forgot what the Arabs did to them and never forgave for what the Arabs did to them. And they are waiting for the wind, which they will be able to take revenge. And they have patience. You know, in the Quran there is a verse which says, Inna Allah ma'a sabirin. Allah is with those who have patience. So they have time and patience. So when it comes to groups who live in one place and have their interests and leadership and fighting militia, to start changing their culture is a very, very hard mission. Because you have to convince them, no, maybe to force them to send their kids to another place where they can learn another culture, speak another language, meet other people, change their mindset, come home with another new agenda. Who will let you do this in a place like Los Angeles with its fighting militia? Okay, this is why in the Middle East, when you come to change culture, it is very hard because you never face one person or individual or people who are individuals. You are always facing a group. Either it's a religious group, like Muslims or others, or it is an ethnic group which lives in a certain place and is very determined to keep and preserve its culture, or a tribe, or a sect, or whatever. And this is the problem in the Middle East which people here cannot understand or find it hard to understand because America works according to another rule of individualism, which doesn't exist in the Middle East or exists in the margin. The Arab Spring came in the end of 2010 when people started to be angry or too angry at those countries or those regimes who control these countries. Why? These countries, I'm talking about Syria, Egypt also, but Egypt is different, a slightly different case. But talking Libya, Yemen, these tribal states, which are like conglomerates, were all controlled by one minority, which took over the whole country. In Yemen, it was the tribe of Ali Abdullah Saleh. In Libya, it was the tribe of Gaddafi, who took power in the end of 1969. 42 years, he sat in the same rack. And Gaddafi, by the way, his name is very interesting. Gaddafi is an adjective on the name of the tribe, like Tel Avivi, which is somebody who lives in Tel Aviv. Haifa'i, somebody who lives in Haifa. Okay? So the same thing in Arabic, Gaddafi. So his name was Gadaf, but it was the half of the name. The real name of his tribe was Gadaf ad-Dam, which in Arabic is somebody who spritzes blood or sheds blood. Not his own. The others. And according to the stories in Libya, they got their name for a reason. Because this is how they treated others. So, no wonder. This man was very innovative in finding ways how to get rid of his opponents. like throwing them from aeroplanes into the Mediterranean Sea, like throwing them into big cans or containers of acid. Atrocities like this. This was Gaddafi. This is how he controlled his people. 160 tribes are in Libya only. Saddam Hussein with his methods, and also he was a minority of the Dulaimis, one small tribe in Iraq. And in Syria, the Alawis took power by force in a series of revolutions, started in 1966 when Salah Jadid came to power, then Assad in 1970. And the Alawis in Syria, although they are a minority, which is more or less 10% of the population, but their problem is not that they are a minority which does not have the legitimacy to rule because they are a minority. Their real problem is that they are infidels, idol worshippers, who, according to Islam, have the choice between converting to Islam or being shortened by head. And this is the problem of the regime in Syria. Because the regime is, as we say in Hebrew, ben mavet, should be killed because they are infidels. And this is the core problem of the legitimacy of the regime in Syria. I dedicated the whole, my PhD and then a whole book to the methods which this regime in Syria developed in order to create legitimacy from scratch. You can read it. This is in simple English. Assad in search of legitimacy, message and rhetoric, as Gil mentioned. And you can see how innovative this regime was in creating methods to create legitimacy. And the more it tried, the more it failed. Because the people knew exactly who they are, what they are, and the more the regimes attempt or try to convince the people to accept the regime as a legitimate regime, the failure was even bigger. And this was the problem. And Assad, father and son, were going in the world with a 3-part jacket or suit with a necktie, and he was an eye doctor, you know, and everybody relates to him as if he is like any other president of any other state. Nobody understood that those years when he was walking around in all kinds of corridors with other leaders in the world, he was the last leader with legitimacy. Who thought about it? So these countries, I would say, were or could be compared to a barrel of explosives. Something which very, I would say, genetic problems. The fact that the state is a conglomerate of groups which never live in peace with each other, and they live in peace only because they are controlled by a dictator who is illegitimate because he represents a minority, especially in the Syrian case, a minority with no right to live. This barrel of explosives would be steady, would be stable, unless a phenomenon started in 1996. At the end of that year, the Emirate of Qatar started to broadcast with satellite, the channel Al Jazeera. Until that day, Arabs were exposed only to state media, which broadcast in radio, newspapers, of course, radio, and UHF and VHF TV channels. And UHF, VHF you can control very easily because the range of broadcast is 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, not more. So if the government broadcast, nobody can intercept from other places because they are remote. But when you start broadcasting TV with dish, that means with a satellite, you can cross continents with a signal because you broadcast to a satellite and it broadcasts back to the earth to another continent. So the distances now became much shorter, And an emirate like Qatar could broadcast to the whole Arab world. And they had a very special agenda. The agenda of Al Jazeera from the beginning was media jihad against the regimes, against the dictators, media jihad against America, against Israel, against the West and Westernism, means the culture of the West, and promoting the cause of the Muslim Brotherhood. This was Al Jazeera from the beginning. And every news broadcast, every program, every debate program, for women, for whatever, maybe not the weather, but everything else was designed to work according to this agenda against Israel, the dictators, America, Westernism, and to promote the Muslim Brotherhood. I give you a good example about what is it to be against the dictators. You know, Mubarak and Assad and others were renewing their presidency every 4 or 5 years by a referendum in which they were the only candidate, and they always won by 99%, more or less. Okay? So Al Jazeera used to call them the rulers of 99% under the zero. As if there is such a thing. But because they have no legitimacy at all, and those 99% actually doesn't reflect anything. Okay? So this is one of the mild expressions by which they try to denigrate and to bash those dictators. Of course, they also exposed of all kinds of shaming things which they were doing, like stealing money from the peoples, fooling around with girls, and so forth. I would say that Al Jazeera, since 1996, because of this propaganda, especially against the rulers, surrounded this burn of explosives with gas fumes. Because of this incitement against those rulers. All it needed was a spark. And the spark came from Tunisia, by chance. When a young man named Muhammad Bouazizi, in December 2010, set fire in his own clothes because he was slammed by a policewoman, or maybe this, maybe not. There are all kinds of stories about why did he do this. And he burned himself and burned the whole Arab countries. All those countries which were. And this is actually what happened then. Because immediately Al Jazeera started to bring his picture with the fire, and demonstrations in his town, Sidi Bouzid, which started because of his injury. That later he died in like 2 or 3 weeks later. And the demonstrations spread to Tunis, to the capital of Tunisia, and people were demanding that Ben Ali will run away, will leave them alone after 23 years of more or less democratic dictatorship, and they know how to do this. And then he actually ran away. And when he ran away, after like almost a month of demonstrations, of course he took on the way like 1.5 tons of gold from the central bank. So he was also a robber, not also. And with his wife, of course. And he went to Saudi Arabia with his pension in the airplane. Big pension. 1.5 tons of gold. And since that minute, when he left, Al Jazeera started asking on air, who is the next? Which country is the next? One day later, it started in Egypt, and then in Libya, and in Bahrain, and Yemen, and then in March, like 2 months later, it started in Syria. And in Syria, the flames are still until this very day. Only recently, like 3 days ago, we found tremendous pictures of people who were tortured by the regime. I was not surprised because this is how this regime acts since it came to power in 1966. But in 1966 they didn't have cell phones to take pictures. Now they have. So there's a whole difference. So this is actually what happened. These countries now are burning because of many years of dictatorships, and the people actually want to end with two things. One is the dictatorship, the rulers who control them with vicious methods, like Saddam Hussein, like Gaddafi, like Assad and the others. And they also want to get rid of the borders which the colonialists drew around them, merging together groups which never became or never turned into one nation. This is why what we see today, that Iraq is already divided between a Kurdish state in the north. Of course, they didn't declare statehood, those Kurds in the north, but the Iraqi Kurdistan is an independent state totally. They have their own government, they have their own army, and you don't mess with them. They have borders which they drew because they like those borders. They drew the borders with some ethnic cleansing. They kicked out some hundreds of thousands of Arabs who settled in Mosul. Of course, this was, when they settled in Mosul, they ethnically cleansed the place from Kurds. Okay? So now the Kurds are doing the same thing to the other direction. Okay? As I told you, they never forget and they never forgive. So they have already the borders and they have their economy. They sell their own oil. They have parties. They have mass media, and they even once approached me to be the commentator about Israel in one of their channels. I said, "Hey, I don't speak Kurdish." So they said, "No, you can speak in Arabic." Everybody was forced to learn Arabic in Kurdistan. Okay, maybe now they don't. They are not forced to learn Arabic, but I couldn't. So they do whatever they like, and they actually seek relations with Israel. They have nothing against Israel. They still remember the days when Israel helped them against the Iraqi regime until 1975, when Israel was forced to leave the Kurdistan because of the peace which was signed between the Shah and the Iraqi regime. So part of this peace was that Iran will not let any more Israel go through Iran to the Kurdish district of Iraq. So they remember who helped them, like Israel, and they definitely would sign tomorrow peace, not mutual relations with Israel if they only could. Part of the tribes of Iraq already announced that they are forging states, like here. Means autonomy but not full independence from the central government, because the central government doesn't function. Sudan was officially divided between the northern part of Sudan with the capital Khartoum and the southern Sudan with the capital Juba, which witnessed some thousands of people killed in battles during the last month or 2 months ago. And so it's officially divided. And every part of Sudan, the north and the northern and the southern, keep fighting internally in the north between the government and Darfur, which demands independence, and in the south, the Dinka tribes who shape the government have not yet succeeded to spread their hegemony over the other tribes who demand independence. So it will continue maybe to be divided, these two parts of Sudan, like I would say the same phenomenon as amoeba, which I'm talking about, this is the phenomenon. Because don't forget that originally Sudan was a state of 600 tribes, no less. In the north, Muslims, in the south, Christians and animists, so they never had anything together except for a vicious fight for freedom. In Sudan there was a war for like 50 years between the north and the south. some 2 million people were killed. Who heard about this? Who knows about this? Who cares that Arabs kill Arabs? Okay? Human rights. Libya. Libya is falling apart. People talk today about 3 states which might emerge because of from the ruins of Libya. They talk about Tripolitania in the west, Cyrenaica in the east, like Benghazi, and maybe in the south, another state for the Berbers who live, or the majority of the southern part of Libya. Yemen, which was united at the beginning of the 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union, now people in Yemen demonstrate in order to resume the independence of the southern part of Yemen. Means to renew the division between northern Yemen and the southern Yemen. When you look at the Palestinian Authority, for example, you can also see how Gaza became a state 6.5 years ago under the rule of Hamas, whether we like it or not, but it is a state. They have their border, government, army, police, military, industry, whatever a country or state needs, they have. Excuse me? Everything they have, even education against us. No. I might not like what happens there, but if I have to ask myself, is this a state or not? The answer is yes. Why? All the characteristics of a state, you can see it very clearly in Gaza, and nobody fights there against the regime. Of course, they here and there some jihadists, but it's not like in Iraq, which is a dysfunctional state. Hamas are functioning very well. So when you, in Syria, of course, because of the war, the Kurds already in the northeast part of Syria actually function like their brothers in Iraq. They have their own district, their own state, their own governing group of politicians. They have parties, they have their own, and they will never, read my lips, they will never return to live under the rule of Arabs, as they did until the Arab Spring sprang. The Alawis in Syria, if they will be willing to keep their heads connected to their shoulders, they will have to run away to their mountains where they live traditionally and make a state there and to defend it. Otherwise, the Islamists and the Al-Qaeda will come and slaughter them because that's what they believe that it should happen. The Druze in the south, which is a different religion, different tribe, still fantasize on renewing their independence, which was denied from them by the French when the French forced them by their army to join Syria in 1925. They still dream about being left alone and to run their own business by themselves. So definitely Syria, Assad might remain in some enclaves, maybe in Damascus, maybe in the Alawi district, maybe both, maybe I don't know. But he might stay. But I don't believe that today the majority of the country is ruled by others, especially the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, Daesh as they call it in Arabic. And today there is an Islamic State in the northern districts of Syria, Raqqa and Halab. This is why they keep bombing Halab with barrels full of explosives. And there is already another state, the Islamic State, which is functioning in the northern part of Syria. We might not like them because they are Al-Qaeda-like country, but they live there, they function there, and it is very hard to oust them. Assad will tell you that it's not so easy. In Iraq, the western districts are also have some enclaves of jihadists, of Al-Qaeda-like organizations. Sinai, the same thing. Egypt doesn't control Sinai. In Libya, there are some enclaves of Islamists who are more or less Al-Qaeda-like people. And you can add to this what happened in Mali half a year ago when France was forced to intervene in what happens there because of some jihadists. Somalia, big time with Islamists. What you call it? Nigeria, the northern districts already are run by Sharia law. They burn churches. They spill in the streets all the alcohol, which Christians have in their stores. And definitely you can see Islamic states or Islamic entities emerge when lawlessness actually takes over. So this is actually what we are seeing today. That under the idea of democracy, we start seeing states being fragmented, like the Soviet Union, or Yugoslavia, or Czechoslovakia on one side, and what you have inside of those states is either stable states or stable homogeneous states, like the Druze, which will be in Syria, like the Kurds in northern Iraq, like the Kurds in northern Syria, all these ethnic groups which came to their independence, just like the Kazakhs and the Uzbekis and the Armenians in ex-Soviet Union, the same phenomenon. And some of them become Islamists because people came there and established Islamic states. So to say that it will be democracy, I'm at all not sure. Stable groups like Kurds can very possibly establish states or run their states with more or less democratic means. And it takes time until a society becomes totally democratic, like it is in here, mainly because they didn't go through the fragmentation to individuals as the society in this country went through. They are still living groups, yet with the time they might also become more, let's say, more humane, more democratic. To achieve democracy could take a long time. Iran will fall apart. No doubt. I have absolutely no doubt. When the regime will collapse, Iran will fall apart. Two, a Persian state in the center, Azeri in the north, Kurdish state in the northwest, Baluchi in the southeast, Arab entity in the southwest, and these are actually the main ethnic groups which Iran is built upon, and they are kept together only because of the dictatorship. Today it is a religious dictatorship, and until 1979 it was a secular national dictatorship ran by the Shah. So between the secular dictatorship and the religious dictatorship, Iran exists only because it is a dictatorship which suppressed everybody under the flag of Iran, just like the Soviet Union, which oppressed anyone, the Uzbekis, the Kazakhs, to live under the Russians as long as the Soviet Union exists as a regime. Once it collapsed, all these ethnic groups forged their own countries. So the same phenomenon happened in the Middle East. It will take time, and unfortunately blood and tears and fire, because regimes do not give up so easily on what they have. The last sentence. There are stable states in the Middle East. I'm talking about Kuwait, Qatar, and the 7 Emirates of the Union, the United Arab Emirates. Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Ras Al Khaimah, Fujairah. Okay, these. They are stable, and they see no Arab, no spring. Why are they stable? Not because of the oil. Iraq has oil, and it's not a stable state. And so is Libya, with much oil, not a stable state. Yemen, Nigeria, Sudan, all these oil-producing countries, and as far as could be from stability. What makes the stability in the Gulf? The fact that every one of these states is one single tribe. Kuwait, Al-Sabah, this is the name, Al is tribe. Al-Sabah, Qatar, Al-Thani, Abu Dhabi, Al-Nihyan, this is the name of the tribe, and every one of this is on Al. Al means tribe. The leadership of those tribes from 200 years ago, when they were riding camels in the desert, today it's the same families who run the tribes, the tribe states, when they are riding golden Lamborghinis. Even in Hollywood you don't see these things. Or Bugattis made of platinum. Okay? Handmade, hand-tailored, custom cars. Okay? This, so, they are legitimate. The state is legitimate because the state belongs to one tribe, so the state and us is the same thing actually. And the regime is ours because these are our, and they have no elections. They don't need elections. They have the leadership. They are not competing with anybody like politicians in democratic countries. Whom will they vote for? They have already the leadership. And the leadership, because it is legitimate, it takes good care of the people. Take good care of the people. Why? They feel responsible for the people. Unlike in Syria and Libya and in Iraq, because they are responsible only to themselves. And this is the difference. So this is, I think, is the model. The only model which can exist in the Middle East when you take a group and you give them a state. When you merge groups together, they fight. When you divide them and give everyone his own piece of land, they live with peace with each other and cooperate. On the basis of high fences, make good neighbors.
Thank you so much for Dr. Kedar for a very interesting lecture. I already see some fingers pointed out. This gentleman was waiting so patiently, so I'll need to get mileage here.
Dr. Kedar, would you comment on what's happening in Bahrain in light of
Yeah.
Iraq?
No problem.
I can repeat the question. What's going on in Bahrain in light of your analysis?
Bahrain was, I exclude Bahrain from the Emirate paradigm because Bahrain resembles more the conglomerate paradigm.
Stop talking.
Yes.
Bahrain is closer to the conglomerate paradigm. Why? Bahrain is a majority of population of Persians, people who speak Persian, and they are Shiites, Shia Muslims. The Brits brought a little tribe to control the country, to control the island. There are Arabs, Sunnis. Okay? So again, you see a minority which is illegitimately controls a majority. So this is why Bahrain is not stable. Bahrain witnessed some kind of uprising, what they call the Lu'lu'a, is the Pearl Piazza, or the Square of the Pearl, where the demonstrations and some people are actually killed as well, until Saudi Arabia occupied it and cleaned the streets from demonstrators, as they phrased it. So Bahrain actually resembles more the other side of the paradigm, not the Arab Emirates. Thanks for the question, very important.
Yeah, one of our students here, pink shirt.
Picture, okay. Well, you talked a lot about basically, I think your premise was that self-determination for every nation or every people is the correct solution, and it's sort of, you could say, historically mandated. It's likely to happen eventually and will lead to a stable state, which I couldn't agree more with.
Thanks.
I just want
At least
to know,
one important person agrees with me.
I just want to know, because you said you were focused on it, kind of American-Israeli relations, right? And those
So
relations.
that's my institute, not him.
Well,
Let's not mix the two.
Well, either way, I want to know about how you think. I'm not sure if I should phrase a question like this, but what you think that where do you think this puts Israel and maybe by extension America in terms of how we should deal with, say, Palestinian self-determination and its two-state
Very
solution?
easy. Follow the same paradigm. You might know that Arabs who live in the West Bank, so-called West Bank, Judea and Samaria, are also divided to tribes. If you tell me the family name of somebody, I will tell you where he lives. Because they don't move from place to place.
You know the Goldsteins?
Yes. They watch Al Jazeera day and night. And they are very, very concerned about what happens to their brothers and sisters and cousins in Syria and Lebanon. Real brothers who are refugees in Syria and Lebanon. So they definitely know what to do if they only wanted to shake the Israeli boat. But they don't. How can you explain? What, they became Zionists? I doubt it. They started to love the country or the state or Netanyahu. I also have some doubts. So why don't they shake the boat in order to achieve what the Libyans did and others? They have some way to assess what happens there. They prefer, with all the criticism which they have against the country, which all the discrimination which they claim, everything. Israel is not perfect. Yet they prefer to live in Israel under the Israeli occupation of Palestine. They prefer to live in Israel rather to be citizens of any of the Arab alternatives. How do I know? In Israel there are some who call upon the Israelis to mark the borders between us and the future Palestinian state in a way which some Arab villages will be included in the Palestinian state. Not to chase them out of homes, but to mark the border. After all, they are Palestinians. Why should they live in a Palestinian state? You know who objected?
The Arabs.
The Arabs objected. So recently in Israel we found out that actually Palestinians, all the Palestinians, want two things. One is Palestinian state, and the second is Israeli ID card. I'm not trying to be funny. Look how many of them marry Israeli girls, Arab Israeli girls, in order to get what they call zawaj al visa. Means marriage for a visa or for identity.
A green card.
So,
The Middle East, North Africa, the areas that are now predominantly Islamic were ethnic groups and tribes that were overwhelmed and overcome by the Islamic outreach, and they were described as you described them. In America, it was an effort of breaking away from a worldwide empire, and it also had intellectual and philosophical underpinnings to what we were trying to do here. As the state evolved, there were two circumstances that were breakaway wars. One was a huge war, of course, the Civil War, in which a light cultural phenomenon in the South needed to be overcome by the central government. The other never quite rose up to that, but the Mormons had their own army and were eventually given the ultimatum: we will come in there and crush you if you don't stop what you're doing and become part of, what is the civic idea of the United States. So how would you talk about the idea of the United States with regard to its it's the way it was formed, its independence with its intellectual and philosophical underpinnings, as opposed to peoples who basically became overcome and had to live with that, even if it has been centuries or millennia.
Well, unfortunately, I didn't dedicate enough time to learn about the American history. I must admit, it's not my forte. Yet, I think that, look, there could be some similarities here and there about imposition of ideas and so forth. Definitely. But you mentioned the intellectuals. One would expect that Arab intellectuals, and there are many of them, those who finished universities in the West and also in the Arab world, open their mind to see other countries, to see other societies, to see what democracy is, to see. There are many Arabs like this. So we actually can ask, hey guy, where are they? How come they are not leading some modernist, let's say, movement of intellectuals to bring the Arab world to more modern, let's say, situation? Just like in Europe, Voltaire, for example. Okay, these intellectuals who were the drivers of the engine which brought Europe to modernism. Okay, where are they in the Arab world? And well, in order to answer the question, I invite you to join one of my seminars, which take 28 meetings of an hour and a half about intellectuals in the Arab world. Where are they, and what is their influence? But the bottom line is that they are either, let's say, shut up. They shut up in order not to expose themselves to the knives either of the Islamists, like Najib Mahfouz, who was stabbed because he criticized the Islamists, or to be thrown in jail because they criticized the regime, like Sa'ad Ibrahim in Egypt, who criticized Mubarak for many years for all kinds of things. So Mubarak once in a while sent him to calm him down behind the bars. So either they are stabbed by the extremists, usually Islamists, or of Farag Foda, for example, another intellectual in Egypt who was killed by the Islamists, or put in jail by the regime if what you say is too much to the taste of the regime. Other intellectuals shut up in order not to be neither this nor that. Others run away to Europe, to America, because they cannot take it anymore, because they are afraid of the Islamists and or the regime, and they do not want to shut their mouths. But the worst are those who join the government to get a position in a university or in the regime or in some other organs in order to have good salary, good life. So they actually become horses to pull the wagon of the dictators. And they are the worst, because they use their knowledge in order to perpetuate the dictatorship. So this is why the modern Arab intellectual, and this is really in a nutshell, has very small influence, because either he's stabbed to death, or he's intimidated, or he's in jail, or in exile, or becomes part of the regime.
We'll take a couple of questions more. He has a plane to catch, so I apologize. Yeah, in front.
We didn't mention Lebanon, and I would like also, if you could, in that context, comment on the possibility of the population transfer as part of the new alignment that will happen in the region.
Lebanon has already population movement, mainly outside. And I mean the Christians, who are running away in increasing numbers because they are afraid from the day that Hezbollah will take Lebanon over. And they definitely have no intention to live under the rule of Hezbollah, of Ayatollah Nasrallah. So this is what happens actually in Lebanon, but in order really to delve into the Lebanese issue, Gil will have to bring me again. So, but...
Budget allowing. One more okay, you're in the front here.
You didn't comment at all about Jordan. What do you see happening in Jordan?
Jordan also lives on a borrowed time, because Jordan also is a conglomerate of at least two groups, the Bedouins on one side and the Palestinians on the other side, who are also not one group, and the majority of the Palestinians actually are subjugated to the rule of the Bedouins. And this is something which intolerable. Because Bedouins in the Middle East are viewed as primitive. I'm talking about reality. I'm talking about stereotypes.
Arab rednecks. Kind of Arab
Stereotypes and images which play major role in the Middle East. You cannot ignore these things. You cannot push them under the rug. You have to take them in account. And being ruled by a Bedouin is something which is intolerable by somebody who lives in a city and considers himself to be elite. And so the falahim, means the peasants, one day it will explode or implode. I don't know when it will happen. And the Palestinians already in Jordan talk about the alternative homeland. Means in Jordan, a Palestinian state in Jordan. Why? Because if, let's say the Palestinians have a state or some states to the west from the Jordan River, still they, in the eastern side of the Jordan River, will not be willing to continue living under the mercy of the Bedouins. So regardless of what happens to the west from the Jordan River, they want their own state in Jordan. Just to commence to finish with the joke. The Jordanian king married a Palestinian wife. Okay? So everybody thinks, oh wow, what a nice. To unite the ranks of Jordan, to show the Palestinians that, yeah, we are one family, and so forth. This is what people from outside think. The Palestinians viewed it in a totally different way. They say that he married a Palestinian woman in order to do to her at night what he does to us during the day. I get it.
In light of the tremendous dislocation both internally and externally in Syria, where there is no ability for the tribes to stay cohesively, and, more importantly, the Palestinian refugee camps in northern Syria are now intermixed everywhere. Do you see a future where the issue about the so-called right of return of Palestinians to Israel will now dissipate? Or how do you see that playing itself out?
This right was not existing to begin with.
Oh, I know that, but I mean, what do you think?
Even according to the international law, they have no right of return. See what happened with the Greeks, which were expelled by the Turks inside Cyprus. In 1974, the Supreme Court for Human Rights in Europe, like 2 years ago, came out with a verdict that they have no right of return. So the same thing can be implemented by Israel and many other. There are books about this thing. I don't have to elaborate on this. So this why I don't think that this question appears. And look, I would ask very small question. How can somebody be a refugee in his own country?
I understand that.
And they are Shamis. They are from this country anyway. So what refugees are?
But they have camps.
There are people who were kept in refugee camps for 65 years with absolutely whatsoever no right. And unfortunately, it happens with American money.
Yeah.
America sponsors this atrocity
Yeah.
or this injustice which was made to them by their brethren who kept them in refugee camps only because they wanted to send them back to Israel, although they were in Israel short period before the 1948 war, and they actually came from these countries, and they still carry names which testify they came from Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, other countries of the Middle East. So this is why Israel denies any right of return, because they never had it. Egypt.
Jared, what's the story with Egypt?
Egypt is another occasion which Gil will have to bring me in, because Egypt went, and this in a nutshell, Egypt went through process of fragmentation and individualization. Is that such a word?
Yes.
Individualization. Because of the High Aswan Dam, which destroyed the traditional agriculture. And millions of Egyptians emigrated from the villages to the cities. So one brother went to Komoshim, his brother went to Beirut, his other brother went to Asyut, another to Cairo, another to Alexandria, and one came to Europe. So the tribes actually do not have a presence in the overall society. This is why the behavior of the society in Egypt is much more political than tribal. This is why, by the way, Mubarak didn't survive for more than 20 days when the demonstration started, because all the politicians ran away from him because he didn't deliver anymore. But in Syria, since it's a tribal society, and the tribes backs the president big time, and in Libya and in Yemen, so the dictator keeps killing his people for years. And this is what makes the difference between Egypt and Mubarak, who didn't survive for 20 days even in the demonstrations, and versus Assad and Gaddafi without intervention of NATO. Maybe Gaddafi would still kill his people until this very day without American and European intervention. And so with Yemen, tribal societies are the regime is tribal, because the man is the head of state. His brothers, his cousins are all around him and surround him, and they support him. They don't betray him, because if they betray him, they're all for. But when it comes to politicians like Mubarak, who supported him? His two sons and wife. That's all. That's all. All the others ran away like mice or rats who run away from a ship before it sinks. Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you.
Where is the seminar, the 28 segment seminar? Online?
Excuse me?
You have to register.
You said I have to take the 28 segment.
Yeah.
Where is it?
First of all, it's in Hebrew.
That part is hard.
Okay. Secondly, unfortunately, it's not online.
Oh.
But you know what? I might take it online. I'm based on my lessons. I write now a book about tribalism in the Arab world. I might write this. Ladies and gentlemen, please learn Arabic in order to understand the Middle East. Nobody of the people who sit here, I am more than sure, would accept any research done about the American society by somebody who cannot speak English and cannot read English. Would you accept such research?
No.
So how come how come so many researchers about the Middle East publish books after articles, day after day, without mastering Arabic? What is the Middle East less complicated than America to understand? Yet, who cares about them? The indigenous people of the Middle East, we don't need Arabic. We can read here translation of that, and they publish things in English, so we can read the thing in English. Who told you that this is the whole thing? Yes.
Last question. So does John Kerry has to learn Arabic in order for him to go into the Middle East and do what he's doing?
I would recommend. I would recommend. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.